If you want me to stay, get down on your knees. Those words were like poison in the air. I stood there in our living room and stared at my 7-year-old wife. Her eyes were cold and unidentifiable. We had been arguing about my work hours again moments before. It was the same fight we'd been having for months. But something was different this time. I never thought she'd do something that would hurt our marriage. The walls of the living room seemed to close in around me as the weight of her demands sucked the air out of my lungs. When I opened the door, I saw her expensive suitcase packed and ready to go. This time, it wasn't a stunt. The light in the evening cast sharp shadows over her face, showing how much she enjoyed seeing me writhe. That's not possible. I made it, but my voice was barely above a whisper. Every part of me wanted to get down on my knees and do anything to stop her from leaving. We had made a life for ourselves. Our family, friends, and neighbors all thought we were a great pair. What would they think if she left? She tapped her foot impatiently while crossing her arms. I really mean it. I'm sick of not being important to you. Show that you want this marriage to last if you want it to. Make me understand how important I am to you. Her voice was eerily calm, almost like she had practiced this moment. I felt like something snapped inside me. Many memories from my life came back to me in a flash. I had to cancel plans with friends many times to meet her needs. I turned down a raise because she didn't want me to travel, and I always walked on eggshells to keep her from disapproving. I didn't mean for things to get this bad. When I suddenly became very clear, it was like ice water running through my hands. It wasn't because I was scared. I put my back straight and looked her in the eyes. It surprised me how strong my voice was when I said, "No. I'm not going to do that." The look on her face changed from smugness to shock. "Please excuse me." "No," I said. "I'm not going to beg you to stay. That's not how marriage works. Love doesn't work that way." She expected to be met with pushback. As she walked toward me, her face turned red. "This is how you repay me after everything I've done for you. By not giving me the one thing I ask of you." I calmed down by taking a deep breath. "The thing you want is not a sign of love. It's about power. I'm done being ruled." "Okay." She spit and grabbed the handle of her bag. "Don't cry on me again when you understand what you've lost." She stomped toward the door and stopped for a dramatic moment, as if she thought I would run after her and change my mind. I went to the door and opened it for her instead. She looked so shocked that it would have been funny in any other setting. "I feel bad about this." As she brushed past me, she hissed. The smell of her perfume lingered, and it almost made me doubt myself. I honestly answered, "Maybe, but I'd feel worse giving up my pride." With a firm click, the door shut behind her. There was an eerie silence after that. I leaned against the wall and slid down until I hit the floor. The shaking in my body that I had been trying to control finally came out. What did I do? Had I wasted 7 years of marriage on a moment of pride? But as the minutes went by, something strange happened. I could feel something else growing under the worry and fear. I felt light and sure that my choice was the right one. I stood up for myself for the first time in years. I wouldn't let myself be put down. As I stood up, I went to the window and watched her car drive off down the street. The future stretched out in front of me, scary and unclear at the same time. I never thought this would be the end for us. But as I stood there by myself in the quiet house, I thought it might be the start I so badly needed. I reached for someone who wasn't there when I woke up the morning after she left. The harsh truth hit me when I touched the cold, empty sheets with my hand. For a moment, fear filled my chest. What did I do? It was over in an instant because I couldn't get over my pride and give her what she wanted. I looked at my phone. Not a single message or missed call. A part of me thought she would calm down overnight and reach out. The quiet said it all better than any words could have. The house felt different when I finally got out of bed. It is quieter, but it is also less suffocating in some way. I went into the kitchen and made strong, black coffee the way I like it. Not the watered-down version she always said would help my nervousness. It was a small choice, but it was mine alone. By noon, her mom had called. The chat went exactly as I had planned. I didn't deserve her daughter because I was selfish and rude. After listening quietly, I told her that she had asked me to get down on my knees and beg her to stay. Would you have done that? I knew everything I needed to know from the shocked silence before she hung up. By evening, her friends were texting her, clearly believing what she said. What's wrong in paradise? Is everything okay? I didn't know what to say. How do you explain the fact that your marriage was actually a well-planned jail that you didn't even know about until someone told you to crawl? She had always said that a place was too greasy, but I ordered takeout from it. As a small act of defiance, he ate it right out of the jar while sitting on the couch. Nothing on my lap, not even a coaster or a napkin spread out neatly. I almost laughed out loud at how silly these small freedoms were. That second night, I couldn't fall asleep. At 2 a.m., I was standing in her closet, running my fingers over her clothes and taking in what little of her presence was left. Her half-empty dresser drawers showed that she had left quickly, only taking the things she needed. Rather, she thought I would beg her to come back, which is what she really meant. It became clear to me when I took a shower and looked at myself in the mirror for the third day. The man who was looking back looked old and tired. When did I start to get that permanent line between my brows? When did it become heavy on my shoulders to always be ready for criticism? I didn't go to work because I was sick, so I cleaned all day. Not just cleaning up, but getting rid of things. I moved the furniture around in the living room and put my chair by the window, which is where I've always wanted it. I changed the art on the walls by putting up pieces that she thought were too manly or simple. The space became more mine as things changed. By the end of the week, her sister, who was asked to be the peacemaker, had reached out. Mom and Dad are taking her in. She told me, making sure her voice was neutral. She thought you would have called by now. Did you hear what she said? I asked. Stillness. She told him that you wouldn't fight for your marriage. I laughed so hard I could hear myself. That's one way to look at it. Even though the talk ended badly, it led to something important. For what did I fight all these years? A relationship where my worth depended on how ready I was to be dominated. Where love depended on doing what you were told. Over the weekend, I looked in the closet in the spare room and found a box full of old pictures. Old photos of us from before we met. Going on camping trips with college friends. A half-marathon finish line. When I was younger, I was grinning big at a show. When did I last enjoy the things I used to do? When did making her happy become all I cared about? I sent Mark a text message. We hadn't seen each other in almost 2 years because she thought he was too young. That night, we got together for a beer. It was strange at first, but by the third round, it didn't seem like any time had passed. When I told him the short story, he just nodded. He didn't ask about her until the end. He only said, "Man, we've missed you." I realized something important was going on as I drove home, a little buzzed and feeling more like myself than I had in years. It wasn't just the end of a marriage. This was the taking back of an identity. As I pulled into the driveway, I saw a car I knew parked across the street. Even though my heart hurt, I didn't go near it. I went right into my house instead. It wasn't our house, it was mine, and I shut the door behind me. After 10 minutes, the phone rang. The screen showed her name quickly. I just stood there and watched it until it stopped. A text message showed up almost right away. "Let's talk." There was no answer on the phone, and that night I slept better than I had in years. I finally called her back 2 weeks after she left. The talk was short and not very interesting. She suggested that we get coffee and talk about what was going on. I agreed, but only in a public place. There was something soft about her voice that made me suspicious. We met in a city cafe, which was a safe place. As always, she looked stunning when she got there, but there was something different in her eyes when she saw me. Surprise, and maybe even a small spark of gratitude. I went back to the gym, cut my hair the way I liked, and started wearing clothes that fit me properly instead of the plain, large shirts she always pushed me toward. She told me, "You look different," as she sat down next to me. I just said, "I feel different." It seemed like she was giving a prepared speech about talking things out and finding a middle ground. About how marriage takes work and giving up things. I listened and occasionally nodded, but I felt a strange sense of distance. It was her words that used to make me question myself so much, but now they seemed clear and dishonest. She finally caught herself and reached across the table to take my hand. "I've been thinking," she said. "I might have been too upset that night. Both of us said things we didn't mean." I took my hand away slowly. "You and I both meant what we said." Her face turned serious for a moment before it softened again. "We might need to go to therapy together. We can get through this." "What exactly do you think we should be working toward?" I asked. "Going back to the way things were. Because I no longer want that." That talk changed everything. I left with more insight than I thought I would have. She wanted to get back together with me not because she missed or loved me, but because my freedom made her feel less in charge. The month that followed was a time of great change. I got back into photography, which she thought was just a hobby and not worth pursuing. I joined a hiking group in my area. I took the job promotion that needed some travel from time to time. For a weekend, my sister came to visit. She had always kept a safe distance from my wife. "I got my brother back," she told me as she hugged me tightly and left. She had no idea how much those words meant to him. The divorce papers were still signed and sitting on my kitchen counter as spring turned to summer. It wasn't that I was unsure, it was that going forward didn't seem as important as my own renaissance. Every day I learned something new about myself, my likes and dislikes, and thoughts I had hidden to keep my marriage peaceful. I bought a motorcycle, redecorated the bedroom, and painted the kitchen the deep blue I'd always wanted. These were all big decisions that would have caused weeks of stress before. It was amazing to be free. Unexpectedly, social media turned into a war. Friends tagged me in pictures from hikes, shows, and a weekend trip to the coast, but I didn't post very often. The shots of me make me look calm and happy. I knew she was looking. Her posts about fancy meals and nights out became more and more staged, with carefully worded captions about how lucky she was. She came to my door without warning the first time. It was a wet Tuesday evening, as she pointed out, and it was our door. It was clear that she had been drinking because her cool was starting to crack. She pushed past me to get into the house and said, "You changed the furniture. The paint too. I don't like dark colors, you know that. That's why I picked them." I told the truth. She went around the living room like a cat on the prowl, touching things and moving things around on shelves to claim her space. "Are you going out with someone?" she suddenly asked. I wasn't ready for the question. I wasn't, but the way she spoke showed that she was jealous. Would it matter if I was? For a moment, her face got scrunched up. It was the first real feeling I had seen in years from her. "You can't just throw everything away. 7 years. Do you not care about them?" "They were very important to me." It was quiet. That's why I had to pick myself in the end. She stood at the doorway with rain in her perfect hair when I asked her to leave in a strong but kind way. She said this to herself more than to me, "You'll get tired of this rebellion. You'll understand what you've lost." Something important struck me as I watched her drive off. I could no longer be affected by what she said. That door was gone, and the man who would have done anything to stop her from leaving was no longer there. That night, I finally signed the divorce papers and mailed them. I wasn't angry or sad about it, I was just sure that I was finally on the right track. How to get back to myself. A bright Tuesday morning in early fall marked the end of the split. The confirmation email came to me at my desk, where I was surrounded by coworkers who had no idea how important that moment was. I said goodbye, went outside, and took a big breath of the cool fall air. They were no longer married after 7 years. They got a digital notice and a stack of court papers in the mail later that week. I thought I would feel something big, like sadness or at least a sense that everything was over. Instead, there was a sense of peace. The legal end of our relationship only made what had happened mentally months before official. After a nice scotch and takeout from my favorite place that night, my phone rang with a message from her. Is it done? Only those 3 words. There is no feeling or remark. That's right, I answered. It's done. 3 dots showed up, went away, and then showed up again several times. Last but not least, I never thought we'd get here. I didn't answer. What did you want to say? That I never thought speaking up for myself would cause our marriage to end. In my heart, I had hoped she would see how unhealthy our relationship was and really want to change it. It looked like the most honest answer was to keep quiet. After 2 days, flowers showed up at my office. A very fancy design with a simple card. Congratulations on getting the new job. You were always going to do great things. It was signed with just her initial. My coworkers thought I was great. Secret crush. My team leader made fun of me. That kind of thing. Being the center of attention made me say something. The act was planned. She was very aware of what she was doing. The company's website had written about the deal. Anyone who looked me up can now see my new title. It was her way of telling me she was still there. There was more to come than just the flowers. Over the next few weeks, random texts began to come in. At first, nothing bad. A funny picture. A question about where I kept some cooking items she couldn't find. A comment about the marriage of a friend of both of you. Each message was made to look like it was safe. Each one is meant to make the link again. I kept my answers short, factual, and free of feeling. It was clear that this wasn't the response she wanted. The writing got clearer. I miss having coffee with you every Sunday morning. Do you remember that funny little Italian place in Providence? It was the weekend before I went back. Without you, it wasn't the same. She stepped it up when I didn't take the bait. A call late at night, her voice was a little slurred. Do you think about us often? What we might have been if you weren't so stubborn. Unwilling. I said it again, not being able to hide my shock. Do you know what it means to refuse to kneel? She changed her tone to sound softer and more sensitive and said, I was testing you. I never really thought you'd do it. I was interested in how far you'd go to help us. It was so clear that they were trying to trick me that it almost made me laugh. I firmly said, good night, and hung up the phone. The next weekend, she showed up at my favorite coffee shop, the one across town that I started going to just to get away from where we used to hang out. She was sitting at a corner table and acting shocked when she saw me when I walked in. How likely is it? She exclaimed, her eyes wide with the made-up coincidence. She looked good. The way she smiled was different from how it had always been, it was almost broken. I did not want to make a scene by leaving, so I politely nodded and entered the line to order. Soon after, she was next to me. I had planned to call you. It was like we were old friends running into each other, she said. Next weekend, I'm having a dinner party. A small get-together with only close friends. Come on over. I answered in a calm voice, I don't think that would be right. Her smile got shaky. We lived together for 7 years. We can at least be polite, right? The bartender called my name, so I didn't have to answer. She touched my arm as I reached for my coffee. A careful touch that lasts. She looked at my face and said, "You've changed. You look better." I honestly said, "I am." Something flashed in her eyes, maybe anger or determination. There should be a good time for us to talk and clear the air, maybe over dinner. My phone rang as I was thinking of a polite but firm way to say no. Mark was calling to talk about our hike and bike ride plans for that afternoon. I answered, glad to be interrupted, and told her I was sorry. She called after me as I walked toward the door. "I'll text you about dinner. Please think about it." I stopped her number when I was outside, where I couldn't see her. After 3 days, an email showed up at my work address. "I understand if you're trying to avoid me. I know you need space, but we need to get some work done, and you know it. We're still not over this." When I looked at those words for a long time, I saw the danger hidden behind the persistence. Those words would have made me nervous 6 months ago. They would have made me wonder if I was exaggerating and if I should give up to keep the peace. I just marked the email as spam and shut down my computer. I woke up at 2:17 a.m. to the sound of knocking that wouldn't stop. I stumbled through the dark house because I was lost and thought it was an emergency. At this time, no one comes to visit with good news. I looked through the bug and stopped moving. The motion sensor light lit her up as she stood on my porch, makeup running down her cheeks. Her usually flawless appearance was sloppy, with wind-blown hair and a blouse that wasn't quite tucked in. My first thought was worry, and my second thought was doubt. She called out, "I know you're in there." Her voice cracked. "Just give me 5 minutes, please." I stopped and put my hand on the lock. She was very good at setting up dramatic scenes like this one, where she looked weak and played on my protective feelings. But the logical part of my brain told me that getting involved would only lead to more line violations. I told them through the door, "It's late at night. We can talk about it tomorrow if it's important." She slammed her hand against the door and cried, "Tomorrow is too late. It's all going away for me. I need you for my job and my place. Please let me in." I thought the urgency in her voice was real, but I'd been lied to before. "What did you do at work?" I asked, but the door still wouldn't open. Her voice dropped to a whisper as she leaned her face against the wood. "I've been off task and making mistakes. I was put on bail last month. They let me go today." She let out a sob. "Since you left, everything has been falling apart." "I didn't leave," I said in a quiet voice. "You did." It was shaking as she slid down to sit on the porch step. I opened the door even though I knew it wasn't a good idea. I didn't invite her in, I just stood in the hallway to keep a physical distance between us. She looked up at me with eyes that were rimmed in red. "May I please come in? It's really cold outside." Even though it wasn't cold, I reluctantly moved out of the way. For 5 minutes. As usual, she moved through the room with ease and went right to the kitchen. She filled up the electric pot without even thinking about it. It was something she did all the time. In times of trouble, she had always made tea. "Why are you really here?" I asked while resting against the counter to keep a safe distance. She was busy with mugs and tea bags and didn't look up at me. "My rent is due next month. The rent is going up by 30%. Without a job, I can't pay for it." She looked up to see how I was reacting. I thought, I might be able to stay here. Only for a short time. While I get better. It was unbelievably brave. "It's not going to happen." Her hands stopped moving. "Why not?" "In a moral sense, this house is still half mine, even if it's not legal. During the divorce, you gave up your rights to this land." I told her again. "And this isn't a moral case. You chose what to do. A choice you made me make." Her voice got very loud. "You changed. You became cold and far away. Don't go. I stopped her right away. We both know it wasn't like that. The kettle turned off. We didn't move to pour the water. I made a mistake, she whispered, clearly changing her mind. One stupid, cocky mistake. Do you not think that people should be given another chance? This isn't about forgiving, I said slowly. It has to do with finding patterns. That night, you didn't just tell me to kneel. During our whole partnership, you've been asking for different versions of that submission. Her face got harder, then crumpled up. She started crying again all of a sudden, which was strange. Real tears that are messy and can't be stopped. She fell to the kitchen floor and wrapped her arms around herself. She cried, I have nowhere to go. They believe I'm still with you. I told lies to everyone. I can't look at them. No matter what, sympathy sparked in me. I had never seen her so real and broken. Being compassionate didn't mean I had to give up my limits, though. I said I'd help you find a place. I can also lend you money for a down payment. You can't stay here, though. She looked up with a look of hope on her face. Would you do that for me? After everything? I made it clear, not for you. Because of how we were once. She got up slowly and calmed down. I caught a glimpse of the weak person behind the trickery for a split second. The scared woman who knew that being in charge was the only way to feel safe in the world. She said in a quiet voice, I still love you. That's not true, I know that. But it's real. I didn't answer. How could I say something that wouldn't hurt her feelings or falsely make them stronger? Then she moved toward me and looked right into my eyes. Tell me you don't feel anything. Tell me there isn't still something between us by looking me in the eye. There was a lot of past in the air between us. Every close moment. Every fight. All of the healing. I felt the pull of recognition for a split second that could have been dangerous. She must have felt my weakness at that moment. She reached out and touched my cheek with her fingers. We could begin again. Change how you do things this time. I gently grabbed her wrist and took her hand off of mine. Not at all. That one word only. But it held the weight of 1,000 other things that were not said. No to going back to the past. No to control and submission cycles that never stop. I don't want to give up myself again. She must have finally heard how clear my voice was. Her face changed in some way. It could be resignation. Or just plain tiredness. I said in a soft voice, your 5 minutes are up. She nodded and shook her hands together as she grabbed her purse. She turned around at the door. What I said was true. About how much I love you. I told them I believed them. Love shouldn't hurt like ours did, though. When she left, I stood in the house alone, ready to feel the familiar weight of guilt. Instead, I knew for sure that I had made the right choice. Not just now, but every day since I wouldn't kneel. A month after her late-night visit, I got an official email asking to meet to talk about some last-minute things. No appeals to feeling. No words that are meant to trick. It's just a simple wish for closure. It had a different, more solid tone. We agreed to meet at a quiet coffee shop close to my office. She got there right on time and was dressed very simply, which was very different from how she usually looks. I noticed small changes as she sat across from me. Not wearing her signature red lipstick, putting her hair back in a sensible ponytail, and wearing very little jewelry. She looked more like herself than I had in years. She started by saying, "Thank you for meeting me." She had her hands around her coffee mug. "Help has been given to me. Since then, twice a week." She stopped. "Because I had a breakdown at your house." I didn't know where this was going, but I nodded. She went on, "My therapist told me to make things right." "Why?" "Because it helps me heal, not to get you back or change your mind. And maybe even yours." A small envelope was put on the table between us by her. This is a letter. Read it now, tomorrow, or never. You can choose. I didn't reach for it. What does it have? All the things I should have said years ago. Thanks for the way I treated you. Sorry that doesn't come with any strings attached. She looked right at me. And a promise to follow your rules from now on. She seemed to be acting in a very different way. They were grounded, which they hadn't been before. There wasn't the slight tightness that usually showed she was acting instead of being. She went on when I didn't answer, I found an apartment. It's small and not very fancy, but it's mine. I also start a new job next week. In a different field, at the entry level. That's good, I really meant it. I'm glad things are getting better. She gave a small smile. They're not really. Things are harder. Less big. Not as comfy. However, it's real, which is something I haven't felt in a long time. For a moment, we sat in a strangely peaceful silence. She finally said, I've been thinking about that night when I asked you to kneel. Do you understand why I did that? I wasn't ready for the question. I thought about that moment from every angle for months, but I never came up with a good answer. In charge? Power? See how far I can go when you push me. She gave a slow nod. Yes to all of those. But mostly fear. At first, you were changing small things. Not giving up on small choices. Getting back in touch with friends I didn't like. I could feel you moving away from me and becoming someone I couldn't control. She looked at her hands. So I stepped it up. I'd know I still owned you if you knelt down. If you said no, I would have a reason to leave before you could leave me. I was shocked by how honest it was. I finally caught a glimpse of the scared person hiding behind the cool exterior. Someone who is so afraid of being left alone that she'd rather plan it than let it happen by accident. I said in a low voice, I never meant to leave. I now understand that. At the time, though, I couldn't believe it. She gave the envelope a light touch. This has something else in it. The name of the doctor I see. She specializes in helping people get over relationships like the one we were in. From each side. People who are in charge and people who were in charge. She could put you in touch with a coworker if you ever need to talk to someone. My first thought was to defend myself. There was no one else who needed therapy but me. But the past year taught me that everybody can get better, not just bad people. For those who go through it, too. I said, I'll think about it. She said, yes, and then looked at her watch. I need to leave. What I needed to say is out now. She stood up and got her bag. One more thing. Thanks that you didn't kneel that night. You saved both of us by not giving in. After she left, I sat by myself and turned the package over in my hands. I understood that it no longer had any power over me, whether it was genuine regret or some other kind of subtle manipulation. My happiness. Peace to you. My plans. It wasn't about what she said anymore. As I sipped my whiskey on my back porch that night, I finally opened her letter. It was everything she asked for. A full and honest report of what she did, sincere apologies with no strings attached, and the therapist's contact information. I thought about the last phrase for a long time after I put the letter away. I asked you to kneel once to show that you loved me. For me, the greatest sign of love, both for myself and for someone else, is sometimes having the guts to stand on your own 2 feet. After 2 weeks, I called the therapist's office to make my first visit. To understand why I had given up so much and to make sure I never did that again, not to get back what I had lost or to heal old hurts. That night, 1 year ago, when she left, I found my voice. That night, I climbed Mount Lafayette, which was something I'd always wanted to do but had put off because she thought hiking was useless. As I stood at the top, with the wind blowing around me and views going on forever in every direction, I was deeply thankful for the terrible moment when she told me to kneel. I had finally reached my full height when I refused to go down. That night, she sent me a simple text message. I hope all is well with you. There is no other plan or secret message. I said, I am. I hope so too. She wrote back, getting there. And even after everything, I really wished her the best on her journey. It wasn't because I still loved her or hoped we could get back together, but because I had finally learned the most important lesson. True strength isn't having control over other people, it's being able to believe in your own worth and wish peace to people who have hurt you in the past. It really helps us a lot. I've picked out one more videos that I think you'll enjoy. You are welcome to click on them. I look forward to seeing you in the next story. Have a nice day.